This month, in addition to our regularly scheduled Facebook Live programming, The Human Perspective is continuing to release a series of interviews every Tuesday and Friday from the Nickel Independent Living Summit. The interviews will be highlighting disabled advocates from around the world and across the United States. We're very excited to be sharing their stories. This month, we're also going to be focusing on back to school. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Ann Wei-Yi Kwong, who is a summer intern in Washington, D.C. with the American Association of People with Disabilities. And I've been really fortunate to have her as my mentor. I mean, I am her mentor. Sorry, she's my mentor also, so we're mentoring each other.
I'm very lucky to have you.
She's the co-founder of Survive or Thrive, an experience-based support group and mentoring program by and for disabled people. In 2014, Ann testified before the U.S. Senate Health Committee to advocate for herself and others, informing policymakers of the attitudinal and tangible societal barriers which limits the potential of people with disabilities. Ann is also a PhD student at UC Santa Barbara in California, majoring in special education. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here, and I'm so lucky to have Judy as my mentor.
It's been a great summer. And where were you born?
So I'm originally from Hong Kong. I was born there. My parents, one of them is from mainland China and the other in Hong Kong. They met and decided to have my brother, who's older, and I. And we both have the same disability. We're both classified as blind. We have the fancy name is Leber's congenital amaurosis, and it's a genetic condition. So after my parents had my brother and I, and they were so lucky to have both of us the same, they decided that they will not have any other children, so I don't have a younger sibling.
Oh. So what was it like for you growing up in the United States, going to school? What role did your parents play in helping to advocate for you, to get into school, to attend classes? Were you integrated? Did you learn Braille? Some basic information.
So the interesting thing is, I'll backtrack a little bit. When I was in Hong Kong, there were no inclusive schools. So if you wanted to go to school and you're blind, the only school you could go to is a separate school. And it was a residential school, so kind of a facility, I guess. Interestingly, it was conjoined to the Senior Citizens Retirement Home for blind people. So inclusion in the United States was something very new for me. And when I first came here, I did also attend a separate school for blind and disabled children for 2 years to get English. And the curriculum, it was very interesting because I felt like they didn't hold the same high standards for people who are like blind and disabled. So when I came here, it was very interesting to adjust. As I progressed, I ended up going into, back then they called mainstreaming, now it's inclusion, basically general education, elementary school, middle school, and high school. And it was challenging, I think, because my parents didn't speak English, so they came from Hong Kong. My mother finished 6th grade, so she didn't have a lot of education to begin with, even in China, and not so much at all in the United States. So they were not really familiar with the educational system here. Although they couldn't really advocate in terms of like speaking English and helping me read my homework, they were very supportive in providing transportation to any activities I needed to go to for school, and they always showed up at the IEP meetings, which I was very appreciative of.
They had interpreters?
Well, sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. So there's usually supposed to schedule a Chinese interpreter, but sometimes the interpreter would fail to show up, or they would not be well briefed on technical language. So for instance, they wouldn't know orientation and mobility lessons, or they wouldn't know a cane is called a cane, or Braille is, Braille. They would call it like blind people bumps, or some sort of weird name that really confuses people. And so whenever the interpreters didn't come through, I would have to translate.
How old were you when you started school?
I started school here at 8, and then 9, 10 years old, sometimes I would translate at my own teacher or IEP meetings.
Did you participate in extracurricular activities?
So in terms of kind of like clubs at school, I originally, especially during middle school and high school, really wanted to not only connect with disability but also with my Chinese heritage. So they had this Asian Pacific Islander club where people could go and basically learn about the different languages and eat the ethnic foods and celebrate the festivals. But I felt like the Asian American community sometimes were not always very accepting of disability, and perhaps there's some shame, or maybe middle school and high school students want to fit in with other, peers of their own age. So one of the people told me, "Oh, we would love for you to come only if you did not bring your cane." So as I was growing up, that type of socialization and school clubs was really challenging, and I had to kind of pick between like, oh, do I want friends? And so I felt like that, the plus side is I ended up doing good in school because, hey, if I had no friends to hang out with, I'll read books. They won't, shun me. So I guess it was a plus to that.
But you didn't really get to integrate a lot. I mean, you chose not to in some way. But in other ways, you didn't want to give up your principles.
No. I mean, I did, in terms of, I think one of the negative things is that the only friends that I had really primarily that I hung out with were other people with disabilities, which I think if you're in a school where it's like included in all settings, if we chose to decide to, hang out with each other, that's cool. But if, because everybody else doesn't want to accept you and then you have no choice, or you want to hang out with people with disabilities half the time and other people, half the time, then that's cool. But I think it was just disheartening to know that, my only friends, I know that disabled people have my back, but I guess the Asian Pacific Islander community didn't always have my back.
So you set up an organization with some other people called Survive or Thrive. Why did you set it up, and tell us a little bit about its success?
So one of the interesting things is this all came from a conversation I had with a friend on the phone at like 1 a.m. So I guess, fruitful conversations come late in the evening or early morning. And so we were talking about how oftentimes we feel like society has really low expectations of people who have disabilities. And a lot of times our families are not involved in transition. So for instance, in my particular case, a lot of the information about college was not given to, well, half the time I didn't even get them. And if I did, my family member never kind of got any of that information. It was on English, online somewhere. So for people like me who immigrated, who are not familiar with the system and my family, we didn't get that information. Also, I feel like there's a really strong tension sometimes for people who immigrate, who really want to have a balance between pursuing my future and also being able to have positive relationship or maintain that with my family. And sometimes we would have to choose, like, if you want to be independent, then because the family sometimes doesn't have information, they may be hesitant. So you have to kind of choose between very polarizing forces. So from that discussion, we decided, at 2 a.m., we should do something about this instead of just talking about all these struggles, challenges. And so that's why we decided to start Survive or Thrive, and it's been a really exciting and interesting experience. We've been able to really meet a lot of young people who have similar backgrounds and also work with their families, because our main mission and goal is to really empower and provide information to the young people and their families so that everybody can have access to information about transition and make informed decisions that they collectively want together that's best for them and their family.
So if you had some messages to disabled high school students, college students, and parents, what would those messages be?
I think one of the things that I've learned growing up is always learn to be uncomfortable, because there's always going to be a lot of changes. For me, going from immigrating to the United States, going from separate school to inclusion or mainstreaming, and going to college and learning to advocate. There's always going to be different environments I have to learn and adjust to. And when you come into a new group, a new social group, people may not know about your disability, or there's like that awkward, lingering elephant in the room that's your disability that nobody wants to talk about, but people clearly are aware of it. So learning to be uncomfortable and then turn that uncomfortable zone into, hey, I've got this, like I can break the ice and be able to make friends and make the best out of the situation. And same for family members. I think learning to accept and embrace sometimes change, and really be willing to communicate with the young person who have a disability.
So you can see how lucky I've been to have
Thank
Anne.
you so much.
And we've finished our 10 minutes almost, so I hope you enjoyed this program. Please remember to like and share this video. Also be sure to follow my new Facebook page, The Human Perspective with Judah Human, to see all of the future posts and videos. Our next Facebook Live will be next Tuesday, August 8th at 6 p.m. with Rupa Valdez. She's an assistant professor of biomedical informatics at the University of Virginia, and she will be fantastic. You will really learn a lot from her. As always, we would appreciate your comments and suggestions. I'd like to thank you and look forward to being with you next week.